So today we will talk about state space search and using state space search for developing intelligent user interface. And we will look at two case studies from our own research. And myself, Pradipta Vishwas, I am an assistant professor at Center for Product Design and Manufacturing and an associate faculty at the Department of Cyber Physical Systems. So moving on, first we will look at the term. What does it mean by state space search? And anyway, so when I will move slide, there may be a latency for you to view slides. So I will still call the slide number. So now I'm at slide number 2. So state space search is a abstract notion of solving or defining many problems. And the state can be defined in any different way that you want to define a problem, but necessarily, as the name means, that any particular state of affair, like for example, a legal board configuration in a game of chess, or your position in a particular town, city, or a particular geographical location. Uh, all those you can define as states, or for example, collection of mathematical propositions. All these you can define as state, and as you will see later on the case studies, that you can define the states of your problem yourself, and probably that is one of the main challenge of using state space search. And state space is the configuration of all possible states. So in some smaller case problem, we will see that we can define all possible states, but in many practical problem, as we will see in both in case studies or if we think about the game of chess, that many times we cannot define all possible states because there are too many number of states. So that time we look at particular portion of the state space, and that's the name came state space. That as if it is a like our universe is a very big space, and we only look at a certain portion of the overall space. Now there should be some condition for a state space search algorithm, that we should have some sort of operation for moving between states. That means going from one state to another. And to initiate, we should have a start state. And there should be some sort of a notion of termination of our search. It should not be an indefinite search. So there will be something called a goal state, like for example, a particular configuration in which one person wins a game of chess. And this particular state is defined as goal state. Although later on in some example, we will see that even if we do not reach the goal state but reduce the value of a certain parameter, there also we can terminate our state space search. So, and the main challenge of state space search that I should optimally reach my goal state. That means I say I am at Bangalore, I want to reach London. So there are many intermediate cities, but I will choose a route which will say bring me to London in minimal possible time, or maybe at minimal possible cost, or maybe at minimal possible risk level. So sort of definition of an extrema, that I will have a parameter which I will either maximize or minimize, and I will find a path through these states which will bring me to this goal state in the optimum way. And we, as we told, that there should be some notion in moving between the states, that how we can move from one state to another. So today we look at two different types of this operation from moving from one state to another. One called informed, another called uninformed. We'll look at it. So now I am moving to the third slide. And if anyone is not muted, please mute yourself. So what is a state space model, or what are the components of a state space model? First is a initial state from which you will start the state space search operation. Second is a set of operators. That means something that will map a state into a next state. So for example, if I take the city example, that from Bangalore I will move to Chennai, or from Bangalore I will go to Mumbai. So this going from one city to another city, it's example of an operator. And later on, we'll see that, or you are moving a chess piece from one square to another square. That is also an example of an operation. And there will be a goal predicate to test, see if the goal is achieved. And there are some optional notion that there may be some way of cost of operator. So for example, I can define the cost of my operation as the time. So how much time it takes from going to Bangalore to London, sorry, Bangalore to Mumbai, or Bangalore to Delhi, or from Delhi to London, or Mumbai to London. Or I can define it in terms of risk level, that which will minimize my risk, or in terms of say social distancing, or in terms of consumption of fuel and so on. And similarly, when I will reach the goal state, I can reach the goal state in multiple way, and I can also add up this cost of operators and find the cost of solution. So again, as I mentioned in the last class, that this course is not a course on traditional artificial intelligence. So we will not go into the formal proofs, but we will look at mostly the what is terms. And in this context, what we will going to learn today, that what how to create a state space model, because remember that we will not work on the developing a new state space search algorithm, but uh, in this course, our intention will be more to use a state space search algorithm for our own application. So probably we'll give more thrust, and also I will show you examples on how we can create a state space model, how we can estimate number of states, identify goal or objective function, and how we can identify operators. So, as I told, that we will talk about two types of search strategies. What do we mean by search strategy? That you are in the initial state. Say, for example, you are in Bangalore and you want to reach a goal state. So you want to reach London. And search means that you have to pass through a set of intermediate cities, and you want to see that what will be the best. Say in terms of at this point, say I can say that in terms of risk of being infected with COVID-19, that which airports has the best utility, or which airport are operational. Those are my constraints. So in uninformed search, that we have no clue whether one non-goal state is better than any other. So I do not know that uh, from say Bangalore where I should go. I mean, I do not have any other information. So I am kind of, these are also called, that's why, blind search or uninformed search. So I have to explore various options, and how we can explore various options. So there are some different techniques. So one is called breadth first search, another called uniform first search, depth first search, and iterative deepening and bidirectional searches. So at this point, it may appear to you that why we are learning uninformed search strategies, because we are talking about AI and we must have some way to know that which is good for us. But here you look the problem in a different perspective, that for an uninformed search, we do not need any extra information except the state space and the operators, right? So if I trying to formulate my problem, and I decided to model it as a state space search algorithm. So if I can use these techniques, whatever is breadth first search, depth first search, without any extra information, rather than the states and my operators. So that is the benefit of uninformed search strategies, that it can be applied without any domain knowledge of about the quality of state. So now I am in the slide with heading breadth first search. So here in the next few slides, we will use this tree. You can see A, B, C, D, E, F, J, and where this tree is coming from. So this tree is one example of this state space, or a visual representation. Here these circles represent states, and this dotted line indicates operators. That means I am moving from one state to other. Why this is drawn like this? Because many of these algorithms are easier to explain with a tree structure. So this particular structure looks like a tree, and a tree is a type of graph. So if any of you remember graph theory, so in graph we draw graph by a set of nodes and edges. But even though you haven't learned graph theory, still it's fine. So here you just take it like this way, that this is we have 7 cities, and from city A I can go to either city B or city C. From city B I can travel to D or E, and similarly from C I can go to F and G. So I think that is a better way you can remember it. And remember here we are uninformed, or we are doing blind search. So I have no idea that whether B is good or C is, or whether D is good or E is. So I have to look to all of them. So in terms of implementation, and here we will use some notions of computer science, or basic computer science data structure, that we use first in first out queue structure. That means whoever we will retrieve these nodes and put them into a data structure, and whoever will go in first, it will go out first. And as I earlier told that if some of you are not remember or didn't go through computer science course, we can have a separate lecture on basic data structure and complexity analysis. So don't worry about that. But I think this first in first out is easier to remember. And again, remember that we ourselves need not to implement a breadth first search algorithm. Rather, we have to formulate our problem and decide that whether we should use breadth first search algorithm or not. So in reality, what happens that I will look for one of these node will be my goal node. And when I reach that goal node, say here A is Bangalore and F is London, that when I will reach F, I will terminate my search. But in the subsequent slides, just for explaining, we will frame our problem like that, that if for this particular tree, I have to visit all the nodes, all 7 nodes, and we will see that how breadth first search or depth first search can, uh, in which sequence breadth first or depth first search uh, visits this node. So to moving on, so breadth first search, as the name suggests, that as if I am slicing this tree structure across the breadth. So imagine that this is a inverted cheese of inverted pyramid of cheese, and I have a blade, and I am slicing the cheese breadthwise, right? So in practical, what we do, that first we are looking at node B, and then we look at node C. So there is no hard and fast rule that why B, why not C. So here we are just going from left to right, but you can also visit this node C first and then node B first. That is also fine. And then from B, we will look at node C, because C is equidistant from A, from B. So what do we mean by equidistant? That means that by visiting only one edge, I can reach both B and C from node A. And this way the search goes on. So since I first visited node B, so I will explore node B first. What do we mean by explore? That we will look at the children of node B, or if we use our city analogy, that we will visit all the cities which are reachable from node B. So here it is D and E. And then we will look at node C, the children of node C. So then we will visit node F and node G, right? So the idea is pretty simple, that I will start from the top node, then I will take a slice and visit all nodes which are equidistant from the start node. And then I will repeat the procedure, that whatever node I visited second, that means just after the start node, I will visit all its children, and I will keep on doing this process. So next, how good is the search? So here are some properties that you I will try to explain, but you try to also remember these 4 property. The properties are completeness. That means will this search always reach its goal state or not? Because say as a designer, say you are making a choice that whether I will use breadth first search or not. So you need not to remember all these mathematics behind, but as a designer, you can only remember that whether this algorithm will bring me to my goal state or not. So that criteria is termed as the completeness of a search. And in all subsequent search algorithms, we will use this criteria. Second and third is time and space. So these are very important. And how long will this algorithm will take, and how much space it will take, because those are the crucial function that say you are uh, riding Ola or Uber and the driver is giving a destination. So how long the algorithm will take to find you the optimal route, all right? And say you are running it on your smartphone or you or a computer. So we need have enough space in terms here. Space means memory space. That means that what we define in terms of gigabyte, terabyte, megabyte, etc. So that's why the space complexity is important. Time complexity will tell that how quickly it will bring you to goal state. Space complexity means how much memory space or computer memory space it will take. So here is a very small derivation, and if you remember something from your infinite series, so you will find it not very difficult, but still I will just briefly explain that when I am at the start node, I need some amount of time. Say this unit is I can think it as a constant unit, and then on breadth p, here b is the branching factor. So in the previous slide, if you see, the tree has two branch B and C. Then each of these children also has two branches. So here B is termed as the branching factor. So on the first level, I have to visit B nodes, and each of these B nodes, at most, they will have another B node. So that will be B square and plus B cube. And B is termed as the depth of the tree. And the total complexity will be as a function of b to the power d. So if you at this point are not clear about the definition, you just remember this thing that the time and space complexity are bad. So this search will bring you to the goal node, but the time it will take too much time, it will take too much space. Fourth criteria is optimality. That will it take you optimal or say you want to go from Bangalore to London. So the first question is, will you reach London? Answer is yes. Second question is, will you reach London in the minimum possible way? Minimum possible means at minimum cost or minimum contamination risk, etc. So there are certain conditions. You can remember that here, if the cost is positive, cost means that the uh, cost required for you from moving from one state to another state, say for example, time, fuel, money, contamination risk. If it is positive, that means it will take you to the optimal way. But if any of the cost negative, which is not very common in our practical example, then it will not be optimal. But for most general cases, the cost is positive, or more mathematically correct term is non-decreasing function only of depth, then this search is optimal. And for most practical problem, the space limitation is a bigger problem than the time complexity. So what is the solution? So now we will look at another type of search. Again, our uh, notion is same. Say as if I am trying to reach from Bangalore to London. So these are the cities, and these edges or these dotted green lines are showing my way from one city to other. And depth first search, as the name implies, that it will go across depth. So if you remember our this hypothetical pyramid cheese, so this time instead of horizontally, I will cut the cheese vertically. So depth first search will use a particular data structure called LIFO, last in first out queue. That means whoever came last, that will be popped out first. And how this search will move on. So it will go across the depth. First, I will go to node B because, or I can go to node C also. Here we are just using a convention left to right. So from B, this is still similar to breadth first search. From B, I will go to D and D before exploring C or before checking that whether C is a goal node or not. And here it differs from the breadth first search that I am not horizontally checking all nodes that whether they are goal node or not, but I am going down vertically. Then we will go to the children of D, which is H, and then we will look at I, and then we will look at T. So as if we are cutting this our hypothetical tree across this left vertical line, and when I am not finding my goal node within that branch, then only I am backing up. And this way, then from E I will look at J and K, and then I will look at C, and then we will look at F, and then from F we will go to L and M, and then finally we will go to G and look at N and O. Right. So as you can see from this picture, that the left side of the tree is already explored, and then only I can go into the right side of the tree. So why we are doing so? What is the benefit of that? So is it complete? That means what we just told about completeness is whether it will take you to the goal node, that will it make sure that you will reach London in whatever way possible. Answer is no. If there is any loop means that the there is a age from one of the children to its parent, then it can stuck into the in that loop. Or if there is any infinite depth, like as initially we are telling that for many practical problems, like in case of chess, that I may have infinite number of or very big number of states, it's not infinite, very big number of states, and the search can, if I reach one such very long path, then the search can stuck onto that. And here the time complexity is also exponential function b to the power m, where m is the maximum depth of space. So if it is all bad, then why we are looking at this particular search? Remember that the bigger problem of breadth first search was the space complexity. That space complexity was a function of b to the power d, and as you can remember, nowadays there is too many COVID-19 statistics, and we all come across this curve, exponential curve, and we all know that exponential curves are bad because it signifies that the parameter is increasing very fast. So in this particular case, the space complexity is in linear. It is not exponential, and that is the only virtue of depth first search. That here in depth first search, we do not need exponential space. And since it's not complete, it is neither complete nor optimal. That it cannot, even if it take you to London from Bangalore, it doesn't ensure that you will reaching the optimal path. So only one benefit of depth first search, that is the space complexity is linear. And why? Because we are exploring nodes down a particular chain of nodes following the depth instead of the breadth as in the breadth first search. So when there is one guy, so this is another comparison of depth first and breadth first search, which we already um, talked. So just reiterating, the advantage of depth first search is it needs relatively small memory. Advantage of breadth first search is guaranteed to find the solution, and it's also optimal uh, in for most practical problems. Disadvantage of depth first search is it's failed to find a solution. It can stuck in a infinite path or in a loop. Disadvantage of breadth first search is it needs a lot of space for it needs a lot of space as well as a lot of time. So whenever there are two approaches, researchers try to combine them two together and try to find a new solution. So there are two types of search algorithms, and where people try to combine the benefits of both breadth first and depth first search. So one such search called depth limited search, and the other one is called iterative deepening search. So in the next few slides, we will look at the iterative deepening search. So how the iterative deepening search works. So the principle is very simple, that what is the good about breadth first search? that across a breadth, it will explore all nodes and it will not go down a particular branch without knowing that whether it is an infinite branch or whether it is a loop. So, on the other hand, what is the benefit of depth first search? That it has linear space complexity. So here we will combine both of these together. So first I will limit my depth at L equal to 0. Why I am limiting my depth? Because so that it doesn't go into a infinite loop. Okay. So first it will be L equal to 0, and at L equal to 0 I have only the start node. So it is a trivial condition for computer scientists that when we program that my loop will start at L equal to 0. Then I will make it L equal to 1. For L equal to 1 there are only two nodes, and here breadth first and depth first are both are similar. Now next, if I do not find my goal node at one level, I will increase the depth limit by 2, and within this limited depth limit, I will do a depth first search. So what is the benefit? Because in depth first search, I have linear memory. So here you can see the left side of the branch first getting black, and within this depth limit 2, I will have require less space for the depth limited search, but I will make sure by limiting L equal to 2 that this depth first search is not going down to a infinite path. And then I will repeat the same procedure for L equal to 3. That means that as if I am first cutting my hypothetical cheese at a slice, and within the smaller size of cheese, I am doing vertical cuts or depth first search. Okay. And then there is another type of search also. We'll not go into detail of this search. So here we start from bidirection. That means we write the program in such a way that we search from both start state as well as goal state. That means as if one guy is starting from London, another guy is starting from Bangalore, and somewhere over the Middle East, maybe in Dubai, they are meeting to each other. And that's how they are finding the optimal path from Bangalore to London. So in all these previous search strategies, what we see that we have a set of states, and then I have a set of lines from which I am moving from one state to another. And as I am telling you that it doesn't really matter that from A whether I am going to B or C, we just follow the left to right convention. That's why we first go to B, then we went to C. We can just do the reverse also. That first we go to C, then to B, from right to left. So there is no specific information to me that from A, should I go to first to B or should I go to C? Or from B, should I first go to D or should I go to E? Informed search strategies, we will use some information, right? Now here, uh, now we first enter into the realm of artificial intelligence. Why? Because this information will be in the form of an estimate. That means I do not know the exact information, but I will estimate something. Let's see how we can do that. So first we will look at something called best first search. So what the best first search will do? So remember the previous one was breadth first search. This is best first search. So we'll evaluate the information that can be obtained by expanding a node and its importance in guiding the search. And the quality of a node is estimated by the heuristic search function Wn for node n. So here we will use a heuristic. Why it is heuristic? Because this is not exact information, but some types of idea or estimation about the exact information. So let us explain with an example. So here, please excuse my pronunciation because I am taking this example from the Russell Novik book, and you uh, can follow it easily from the book example. And I don't know why exactly, but the example uses a set of Romanian cities, and I do not know the correct pronunciation. Anyway, let us start. So you can again see a graph, although it's slightly more complicated than our previous tree with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And here you can see some loops, and uh, between the cities there is an edge, and on the edge there is a label. So this label signifies the distance between any two cities. Say for example, In the middle, there is Sibiu and probably Fagaras, and the distance between them is 99 kilometer. On the right hand side, you can see another list or table. This is showing the straight line distance of all cities from Bucharest. For example, on the right hand side, the first one is Arad. This is 300 kilometers away from Bucharest. Bucharest is of course zero from Bucharest, and I think it's Craiova, that is 160 kilometers, and so on. So what is our task here? So we have to reach Bucharest. So in the next few slides, what we will do, that imagine that you yourself in Arad, and from Arad you have to reach Bucharest. So here is Arad, and from here you have to reach Bucharest. Here, Bucharest happened to be the capital of Hungary. Anyway, um, anyway, so what will be the best path from Arad to Bucharest? So and I do not know the exact path. I only know the intercity distances, and I know the straight line distances from all cities from Bucharest. So we will use a heuristic or estimation of cost from n to goal. So what is n here? N is by n. This is a variable. By this, we will define that which city we are presently in. So at the beginning, n will be Arad. Then as I will go through the cities, we will change the value of n to the cities. And we will decide based on this heuristic function that which city I should go next. Right. So here we start. We start from Arad. From Arad, Bucharest is 366 kilometers away. From Arad, I can go to three cities. So it's really small. So Arad is on the left side. So here I can go to this city called Timisoara. There is another city called Sibiu. There is another city called Zering, I think. And on the right hand side, I can see for all these cities which was is closest to Bucharest. So the right hand table shows me that Sibiu, it is 253 kilometers from Bucharest, and this is nearest to Bucharest in terms of the straight line distance, right? From Sibiu, I can go to Fagras, and another city is this one, Rimicovia, something like that. So again, I will look at the right hand side table, and on the top also you can see that I explored three nodes from Arad, the three cities, Sibiu, Timisoara, and Zint. And I looked at their straight line distance from Bucharest, which is written below the note 253, 329, and 374. And 253 is the lowest value. So I estimate that if I go to Sibiu, I will be nearest to Bucharest. So I am going to Sibiu. From Sibiu, I can go to four cities. Of course, I can go back to Arad, which is 366 kilometers away from Bucharest. I can go to Fagaras, what is 176 kilometers away. And then there are two more cities, something called Oradea, I think, which is 380 kilometers away, and the other city is 193 kilometers away from Bucharest. And you may note that I am only using the right hand table. That means the straight line distance of the cities from Bucharest. So here the lowest number is 176. So I went to Fagaras. From Fagaras, I can go to two places, Sibiu and Bucharest. And Bucharest is 0 kilometer away from Bucharest. So I go there. So this is this um, red line is showing my path. And I reached Bucharest. That means what? This search is complete. That means it guarantees me that it will bring me to my goal node. But is it optimal? Interestingly, this best for search is not optimal, because from Sibiu, if I follow the other part for through this city, Rimniscu, Filsi, something like that, then Pitesti, and then Bucharest, my total distance is lower than the previous distance. So here comes the star search. So how star search works? So before going to the star search, let us look at these four properties of greedy best first search. Complete. Uh, well, it is complete in finite state, but tree version can get stuck in loops. Time complexity and space complexity both are bad, and they are um, exponential in terms of the maximum depth, because best first search is working like a breadth first search, and it is also not optimal, as we just noted. So now we look at the A-star search, and so far I know most AI book or artificial intelligence book, they start with this algorithm A-star search, and in a very recent time, if any of you have interest in VR development, I understand that there are some Unity library available on which you can implement A-star search. So the main idea of star search that it avoid paths that are already expensive, generally prefer the simple heuristic search, and there is a condition or called admissible heuristic, and for graph it will also need to be consistent. But without going into the proof, you can just remember that if my all these cost function like the distance, fuel consumption, time, if they are all positive, then this star search is optimal. And in star search, you will use three notion or three functions, and it is important that you remember that, because then it will be easier for you to understand the subsequent slides. So one is Fn. Fn is the total heuristic or cost function. That what do we mean by cost function? That how good is a node or how good is node A. Gn is known path cost so far to node A, and Hn is estimate or optimal cost to goal from node A. Okay, and it's implemented as a priority queue sort function based on the total cost of the function. So let us look at these Gn and Hn in slight more detail. So think you started the search from SI. SI is initial state here, Bangalore. From Bangalore, I want to go to London. So presently, I am in Dubai. So since I flew from Bangalore to Dubai, I exactly know how long I have flown and how much time did it take from to fly from Bangalore to Dubai. So this is already known to me, and I am now at Dubai. What I do not know, that how long will it take from Dubai to London, or maybe what will be the exact distance. Remember that aircraft, they do not follow straight line distance. So I also do not know the exact distance from Dubai to London. So here GS or the function G, it will signify the past, that what has already happened, and what I accurately know, that I accurately know the distance the aircraft took to fly from Bangalore to Dubai, or the time it took to do that. HS is an estimation about the future. So I do not know exactly how much the aircraft will take from flying from Dubai to London, but I have some sort of estimate. So HS is speculation. Earlier in the best first search, I was only using this estimation, that only using this HS, that means distance from straight line distance from Bucharest. But in star search, I will add GS with HS. That means I will add my known information with speculated information and use this summation as my objective function. So let us again look at this problem of reaching from Arad to Bucharest. So I am at Arad. So far I traveled 0 kilometer distance, and Bucharest is 366 kilometer away from Arad. So my total function value is 366. Next, from Arad I can go to three cities as before: Sibiu and Timisoara and Zenit. So if I go to Sibiu, I have to travel 140 kilometer. You can look at the bottom part of the graph, and on top of this red line, 140 is written. So this is the distance of Sibiu from Arad, and Bucharest is 253 kilometer away from Sibiu. So I will add these two values, and 393 is the total value. I will just repeat this procedure for the other two cities. For Timisoara, the total I have traveled 118 kilometer if I go there, and this value is here on the written over the edge. And from Timisoara, the distance of Bucharest I can find from the right hand side table, which is 329. I will add these two, and the value is 447. And similarly, I get 449 for Z. So among these three value, 393 is the lowest value. So I will go to Sibiu. From Sibiu, there are four cities. I can go back to Arad. I can go to Fagaras. So if I go to Fagaras, I have to travel uh, another 99 kilometer. And from Fagaras, the distance to Bucharest is 176. So I have to add these two values. And to so the total value is coming as 450. And similarly, we calculate this value for this other city, Orada, which is 677, 671, and for the Rimiku value, it is 430. And remember that I also have in my data structure the other previous two cities, Timisoara and Zid. And now I will have a set of numbers, and I will choose the lowest. Okay. Right. So here the lowest value happened to be 430. This remaining to Philly, and that's why I we reach this city. And from Remiku Valley, we will see that what are the other cities I can travel. So from Remiku Valley, I can travel three other cities, and for all of them, I will find the total distance that I traveled, and they are estimated straight line distance from Bucharest. And here there is something interesting. When we are looking at all the costs, we find that 415 is the lowest cost. So what we will do, that we'll backtrack. So in the previous case from Rimiku value, we are going to this Pitesti and Bucharest. But in this case, since Fagaras has the lowest value, so we will backtrack to Fagaras. And from Fagaras, we will again uh, explore all the possible paths. And here again, we will store all these values. And here the lowest value turns out to be Pitesti. And see here from Bucharest, Fagaras, we can directly go to Bucharest. But the total value of our cost function is higher, 450. So instead, we will again backtrack to Rimiku Valley. And from Rimiku Valley, we will choose Pitesti. And from Pitesti, we will go to Bucharest. So like that, we will backtrack and we will keep all these value into the queue, and always we will choose the lowest value. So I request you to again look at the book once more and just make sure that you understand this calculation. So this will should be straightforward, that we are adding the values which are written on the edges, we plus the estimated value um, from the right hand side table. Or you can also get these slides and find these values are already written. But I recommend you work it out once yourself with this particular example, and it will be more clear to you. So and after the lecture, if you want me to look back here, we can do so. But for the time being, let us move on. So here are some properties of star search. That star expand nodes in order of increasing f value. Here f means the total cost, and as we see that at every step of the algorithm, we choose all these cost function into a priority queue sorted by their values, smallest to largest, and we always pick the lowest value. And we do not explore any node which has a higher f value before exploring all nodes which has a lower f value. So this is the type of the way this algorithm works. And this way the algorithm works is called the F contours, and this is also a proof that why this algorithm is optimal, because uh, if we can prove the optimality using the method of contradiction, that if the path is not optimal and there is one goal node which can be reached in a uh, less cost, so the star search cannot go to goal node with a less F value before expanding all nodes which are at a lower F value than the present value. So again, you need not to go into the details of the proof for this course, but just remember these F contours that and this method of contradiction, that using method of contradiction and F contour, we can prove that star search is optimal. So now we'll look at these four properties: completeness, time, space, optimal, and optimally efficient. So this is complete, that it will bring you to London, or it will bring you to the goal node. Time and space complexity are again exponential, which is bad. And it is optimal for tree search and with certain condition for graph search, but for most practical problem. And this condition are in terms of the weights on the edges. In most practical cases, if these weights are positive, then it is optimal. And it is also optimally efficient. No optimal algorithm with same heuristic is guaranteed to expand fewer nodes, because it's like a breadth first search, that it expands all nodes which are whose can be reached within a lower F value. So next, from this very abstract example, we'll look at a rather more practical example of developing IUI. But before leaving that, we will look at two different algorithms in our case studies. And in both cases, you will be maybe a bit surprised to know that we are not bothering about the goal state. Rather, we are bothering about reducing the cost function. And also, we are not using star search, because remember, the bad thing of star search is same as breadth first search. The time and space complexity is exponential. And what happened in practicality, that the star search run out of space for even moderate size practical problem. So there are many different attempts, like one is MS star search or memory bound star search, in which just like the depth limit, we put a limit on the total memory expense, and we run the star search within that memory bound. And then there are some algorithm or using a random function. So two such algorithm we will look at in our case studies. One is called simulated annealing, which take the example of the metallurgical simulated annealing, and another one is a genetic algorithm. Again, we will not go into the mathematical parts of those algorithms in detail. Rather, we will explain you in terms of case studies. So let us look at the case study. In the next case study, you will see a video. So in this video, in the last lecture, I showed you a most sophisticated version of this video inside a car. But this was a early example in which we were developing an IS controlled interface. And here the guy is operating this transparent sheet using his IS. And later on, as you saw last presentation, that we implemented it inside a car with funding from Asia. But this was the laboratory prototype, and the three red dots below, that is the IGES tracker. So we'll have a separate lecture on IGES tracking, IGES controlled interface. And here we set up a semi-transparent sheet or see-through sheet through which you can see what is going behind. So it is kind of working as a windscreen. And this particular user interface you can control by looking at. So this was the context of the research, that it was in the domain of automotive user interface, that issues with dashboard drivers take eyes off from road, and undertaking secondary tasks by taking eyes off road is one of the main reason of accidents. And NHTSA USA, they undertook many study on measuring the glance duration when the drivers undertake typical secondary tasks. And they set up a rule that no secondary task should not take more than 2 seconds of the drive. eye glance or eye off from road. But of course, that is not always maintained. So some existing research look at direct voice input or speech recognition technology, gesture recognition system, and hand-free hand or finger movement tracker or virtual touch, by which they all try either you need not to take your eyes off from road, or you can touch a touch screen virtually, which will is supposed to be faster than uh, existing touch screen. But existing problem is the accuracy of many speech recognition system are not very well explored. And as you know, in India there are 26 official languages, and many direct voice input systems are not as rigorously evaluated for regional languages as for English, or also true for many European languages. And for most gesture recognition system, either you have to remember a set of gesture, or you have to remember the sequence of screen which will coming for a typical gesture. So that will, we term it that it will add more cognitive load to the driver, unless it's a very small. So we started our research by developing a very simple optical see-through display. That it's just a semi-transparent sheet through which you can see, and we use a projector to reflect computer screen output onto this semi-transparent sheet, and we put a eye tracker below by which we can track eye gaze. And our idea was that you need not to take your eyes off, but the display from below or below your eyes, it will come in front of you, and you can operate this display either by looking or by through virtual touch. So how state space search problem comes here? So here on the left hand side, you can see a typical dashboard. I took this example from a popular car dashboard, and I just put some buttons to remove the labels, the actual labels. So we term it as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So there are 5, 8, 11 buttons here. And I draw a graph in which I connected the button names to a edge which are neighboring. Why we did so? Because we noted that, say, when you are driving the car is bumping. So even if you are trying to touch the button A, by mistake you can touch the button A for B. Similarly, when we are operating this head-up display or transparent sheet, even though you are trying to click the button A, you by mistake you can click button B or F. Same thing for button C, you can by mistake you can click button B or D. So all this neighborhood of the buttons, we captured it in the forms of age. And then we propose a technology. So this is our contribution, that we put these red dots on this button. Why? Because this red dot, it has very high contrast. And we imagine that when you try to select button F, this red dot will attract your attention and you will look there. And that will reduce the chance of wrong selection. And these red dots in this screen, it looks like we place them haphazardly, but that is not true, because the position of these red dots, we use the simulated annealing state space search algorithm to find this position of this red dot so that it minimizes the chances of wrong selection. Let's see how. So here we are giving an example of defining this state space. And of course, remember that for this particular problem, this may not be the only possible solution, but this happened to be a very working solution. So our state space consists of a possibly infinite set of states or a very big number of states. And a state is defined by a particular position of these red dots on this button. So our initial state is a state in which all the red dots are at the middle of the button, okay, which is most typical, that if I want to draw a dot, I will draw at the center. So this is our initial state. What is our operator? That I will reposition one of the red dot. Repositioning of any red dot is my operator, and a new state will be defined by another arrangement of these red dots on this button. So here you can see a set of orange, blue, and green colored dots. So each set of orange dots or each set of blue dot or each set of green dot defined a state for our problem. So this is our way of defining a state space. Again, remember that as I told, this is need not to be the only possible way, but this is one of the ways we converted this problem into a state space search problem. Now I can draw the dot at any portion of this button. So how will I know that which is the best organization? So I define the function as the distance or Euclidean distance between the consecutive set of dots, uh, say the set of orange dots or set of the green dots. And I then try to minimize this overall distance among the pair of neighboring dots. And we ended up with this particular arrangement, which may not minimize, but which statistically significantly reduce the value of the total distance among these red dots. And here we used an algorithm called simulated annealing. So what it does that it starts with an initial state and then it just randomly change position of one button and then it evaluate the overall cost function. If the cost function is less, then it accept that as the new state and then carry on. But then there is why the concept of simulated annealing is coming. Remember in metallurgy, simulated annealing is termed as a process, and you have a very hot piece of metal, and instead of very quickly cooling it, you are let it cool at a very slower pace. That means you are giving more time it to cool. So the simulated annealing, how this algorithm works, that it uses a random function. So when I am running the algorithm, at initial state, this algorithm let the cost function to increase while I am trying to decrease the cost function. So it looks like a opposite psychology that why I want to reduce it, why I should let it increase. The reason is that if I keep it, let it only reduce, I can stuck to a point which will be like a loop, or in the more AI specific term, it's called a local optima. That means this will only pretend to be a good solution, but it is not actually a good solution. So at some point, I will rather let my solution to get worse in search of a good solution, or I can make an analogy to strategic retreat, that at some point you want to win a battle, so you will strategically will retreat so that you can get a better condition to win the battle. And on the why how the relationship with simulated annealing. So on the initial stages of the problem, it allows the strategic retreat more number of time than in the later stage of the algorithm. So that's about the simulated annealing. So initially, it let the objective function to uh, bounce up and down more times, and gradually it let it to settle down to a minimal value. So all this theoretical stuff is fine, and we theoretically prove that yes, this is will be a good arrangement. But is it really good? So here comes from a domain of AI. We are now entering into the domain of HCI, or human computer interaction. So we undertook a user study with 11 participants, all of them driving. And we used the typical driving task called lane changing task. It has the ISO 26022 is a generic standard of driving related tasks, and one of them is lane changing task. And we let drivers follow this lane changing task. I will describe this lane changing task in the next slide. But while they are undertaking the lane changing task, as you saw in the earlier video, we ask them to operate this semi-transparent display using touch screen, and then using the gaze tracking HUD or head-up display without any hotspots and with the hotspots. So here are the lane changing tasks. So in the lane changing task, what happens that you will operate a driving simulator. There will be 3 lanes, and at a random interval, you will be asked to change your lane among these 3. There won't be any other traffic on the road, and we will measure your driving performance with respect to deviation from the optimal path, standard deviation of steering angle, average speed, average acceleration, and so. So what we noted that for, when they are undertaking the secondary task with this hotspot, their driving performance actually improved, and even it has better than the touchscreen itself. And then we calculated the average time they are taking to select those buttons. Touchscreen was still lowest, but we found that using the hotspot, their average time to select buttons was significantly smaller. So without this hotspot, they are taking 3 seconds in average to select these buttons, but with the hotspot, they were taking around 2.6 seconds, which is statistically significantly lower. Again, in a later lecture, we will describe the term what we mean by statistically significant. So in summary, we proposed a multimodal HART and a better video you saw in the last lecture. And using these drivers need not to take eyes off from road and can be operated as fast as a touch screen. And with this new algorithm, we can significantly reduce the selection time by putting these hotspots. So next we will look at another example. This is a virtual keyboard, as you can see. Okay. So I think you got the idea. So someone is operating a keyboard with ABCD. What are the challenges for the keyboard is that we developed this keyboard for people with severe speech and motor impairment. So the first girl was at Vidyasagar or the Spastic Society of India in Chennai. The other elderly person, lately he had ALS and that impedes his body movement except eyes, and we they cannot use the standard keyboard because there are too many keys and they cannot fixate attention on a single key. So we developed a two-layered approach in which we divide the keys into two set of keys. In one screen we put only nine buttons, and these nine buttons came from our earlier user studies based on the minimum inter button spacing. And when they select one of these nine buttons, there is a second screen where we show four buttons or five buttons, and from that they have to select one. Right. So this is the basic notion. So it is like a tree structure that each of these I have nine buttons, and each of these buttons has four siblings, and we have to put these four siblings. So uh, how state space search algorithms comes here. So when we try to organize these keys in the base, you can understand that here this QWERTY or QW or TY layout may not be the optimal one. And for many of our users, except that elderly professor, they haven't used virtual keyboard before, so they do not know the QWERTY keyboard. So we can give them a different arrangement as well. So when we are trying to look at the best arrangement, which will uh, reduce or make the typing fastest, we look at the total number of combinations. So it was like that. On the second screen, I have four letters, and I can arrange them in factorial for 24 ways. And on the first screen, there are nine buttons. So for each of these nine buttons, I may have 24 combinations. So total, there will be 24 to the power 9 combinations, and it's almost impossible that to calculate the total time taken for each of these 24 to the power 9 combinations. So we used the heuristics and tried to optimize the keyboard using a state space search algorithm. So we used an algorithm called genetic algorithm. So it's a kind of popular algorithm. Like simulated annealing, genetic algorithm will also not guarantee you global optima or optimum solution, but it will guarantee you that it will reduce your overall cost value. So genetic algorithm is inspired from our biological theory of chromosome and gene. So here there are say 4 chromosomes, A1, A2, A3, A4, and it consists of 2 particular operation. One is called crossover, another called mutation. So in the crossover operation, what I do that I calculate my objective function, like in the previous case, the total Euclidean distance. In this case, the total time required to print a certain letter or sentence or a particular corpus. So I can define the objective function based on my criteria. So I will select the best possible candidates that which are either minimizing or maximizing my objective function. And I will, as if I will let them marry each other. That means I will cross over between them, and their children will be my new candidate, and I will dispose of the worst candidates like that. That will I by that I will make sure that the new candidates will have more probability, give me better children, or reduce or increase the objective function. And mutation is this random process. So in the case of simulated annealing, you remember that I have a random function which is letting the objective function to increase or letting me do the strategic retreat for the objective of getting rid of the local optima and going to global optima. So the mutation operation doing the same thing here, that this is a blind random operation, that this also happens in reality. That I think many of you see these X-Men series of movies, and I need not to explain mutation either in science or science fiction. So mutation is a random process which randomly change the chromosome, and the aim is again that let us not stuck into local optima or uh, maximum or minimum value which is pretending to be a good value but actually not, and it let us take out of this local. So we exactly follow the same procedure here. How that we started with a orderly arrangement of chromosome or keys, like on the first one ABC1, then DEF2, GHI. These 1, 2, 3 are actually these letter. So initially we started to put the letter in sequential order. Our objective function was total IGES movement required to type a particular corpus. So here we used a particular file for Brown's corpus. So corpus means it's a standard set of text, and we iterate the algorithm 5,000 times. And then we the output of the genetic algorithm was like a string sequence, which is written below, that CA1BDF2, which happens to reduce the total IGES movement distance or total time by 13% than the orderly arrangement. And then we move to developing multilingual keyboards. So presently, student working on developing a Kannada keyboard, where the problem is even more serious because Kannada has more number of letters than the English alphabet, and also there is yuktakshar and matras. So this is rather more complicated problem, but she is taking similar approach as the previous case of using genetic algorithm of finding the best possible arrangement of keys. So with that, we reach the last slide. So here the main takeaway points is that we introduce you to state space search, and we talked about main 2 types of uh, search strategies. One is uninformed search, another is informed search. Under uninformed search, you talked about breadth first search, depth first search, iterative deepening search, and just introduced bidirectional search. For informed search, we talked about best first search and nested search, and we talked about 4 criteria to compare all search algorithms. These criteria are completeness, that means whether the algorithm will bring you to goal state or not; time and space complexity as a function of breadth and depth of the state space search tree or graph; then optimality, that if an algorithm can bring you to goal state, is it optimal? That means is it following the lowest or highest possible way? And then we show you 2 case study on IUI or intelligent user interface development. One is for our automotive case study, head-up display, and another developing a virtual keyboard. So with that, here I am done talking. So next, I will stop recording and stop screen share. And please do ask me question if you have any. Okay. Thank you.